vera, almost last pH negative MPN. Polycythemia vera is characterized by the elevated red cell mass or increase in the amount of the hemoglobin and absence of conditions producing a secondary erythrocytosis. So polycythemia vera is also known as the erythrocytosis, but primary erythrocytosis. And there is another condition called as secondary erythrocytosis, which occurs because of some predisposing factors which are responsible for increase in production of the RBC. It is characterized by the panmyelosis, which occurs because of the defect in multipotent progenitor. That is, it is a clonal disorder actually, whereas secondary polyerythrocytosis is not a clonal disorder. The incidence is about 0.5 to 2.6 cases per lakh persons per year. Median age is around 60 to 65 years. Slight male dominance. If you remember, as compared to the previous two MPNs, pH negative MPN like ET and MF, male and female dominance, male and female incidence was almost equal, but here slightly male dominance is there. Radiation exposure can be a risk factor for the polycythemia vera. Acquired causes or secondary causes for polycythemia, we should always rule out the secondary causes first, that is secondary erythrocytosis. And arterial hypoxemia is one of the conditions like high altitude, like people living in the sub-Himalayan areas, they have the high amount of the hemoglobin, which is a physiological hemoglobin to them actually. Then cyanotic congenital heart disease. You must have seen the patients of cyanotic congenital heart disease, like Fellers tetralogy. Those patients are having a very high amount of the hemoglobin because of the hypoxemia, arterial hypoxemia. Chronic lung disease, particularly like COPD patients, they are also having the erythrocytosis because of the arterial hypoxemia. Sleep apnea and hypoventilation syndromes. Impaired tissue delivery because of smoking, because of carbon monoxide poisoning. Renal causes are important, like renal tumors, renal cyst, diffuse parenchymal disease, sometimes hydronephrosis, Wilms tumor, renal artery stenosis, renal transplantation. But in these conditions, basically, renal tumors are more common as compared to renal parenchymal disease, because in renal parenchymal disease, simultaneously there is a decrease in the erythropoietin hormone actually. Other miscellaneous causes like tumors and drugs. Tumors include parotid tumors, cerebellar hemangioma, lymphoma, uterine myoma, ovarian tumors, meningiomas, pheochromocytomas, and hepatomas. Drugs like androgens, erythropoietin alpha, when it is used for a long time without monitoring the hemoglobin, and other drugs like the heavy cobalt and nickel. So there is a condition called as absolute polycythemia versus relative polycythemia. Absolute polycythemia, when polycythemia occurs because of the increased red cell mass or decreased total plasma cell volume. So sorry, polycythemia can occur because of these two conditions, either increase in red cell mass or decrease in total plasma volume. If it occurs because of the increased red cell mass, it is true polycythemia. If occurs because of decreased total plasma volume, it is called as relative polycythemia or pseudo polycythemia. And the classical conditions where decreased total plasma leading to the hemoconcentration, there is dengue fever. If you remember, during the monitoring of dengue fever, we monitor by the hematocrit also. That is one of the parameters. So hematocrit increases because of the significant decrease in the plasma volume. Other condition is dehydration, moderate to severe dehydration like diarrhea or third space fluid loss, or diuretic use. Unmonitored diuretic use also can lead to the relative polycythemia. So how to define the polycythemia? Either we take up the total red cell volume or red cell count, or simplest is by the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin more than 18.5 gram per deciliter or 16 gram per deciliter. Sorry, 18.5 gram per deciliter in the European and Asian man, or more than 17.5 in African man, or more than 17 gram percent in women elsewhere in the world. This was as per the WHO 2008 criteria. However, WHO 2016 has reduced the cutoff of hemoglobin to define the absolute polycythemia, and according to WHO 2016 criteria, hemoglobin of more than 16.5 gram percent in male and 16 gram percent in women. Accordingly, the hematocrit has also been redefined. Previously, it was 60% or 56%. Now it is 49% or 48% in male and female respectively. It can be due to primary or secondary causes, as we discussed. So to define, current scenario is hemoglobin of more than 16.5 in men and 16 gram percent in women, or in terms of hematocrit, 49 and 48%. Primary versus secondary polycythemia, as we have discussed some of the causes for secondary polycythemia, the differentiation is very important because primary polycythemia is clonal, secondary polycythemia is because of the non-clonal underlying conditions. And secondary polycythemia is reversible actually. If we are able to contain the secondary reason for the polycythemia, or we are able to correct it, we are able to treat it, the polycythemia is going to reverse actually. Another important point is secondary polycythemia carries no risk of leukemic or fibrotic transformation, low risk of thrombosis, and phlebotomy may be dangerous in such patients. Secondary polycythemia. For secondary polycythemia, majority of time we advise the erythropoietin levels, and majority of time it is elevated or maybe on the high normal. Rarely it is on the lower side. EPO levels may be appropriately raised or inappropriately raised. History of smoking. Then we do the X-ray test for the lung disease, pulmonary function test again for the lung disease, 2D echo for the heart disease, particularly like cyanotic heart disease or acyanotic heart disease with shunt reversal, actually, like ASD, VSD, PDA, when leads to shunt reversal leading to condition called as Eisenmenger syndromes, or SpO2 saturation when it is less than 92% suggestive of EPO-driven polycythemia. So these are the mandatory tests if polycythemia occurs in the young patients, or otherwise also this test should be advisable after thorough examination of the patient. Other condition like evaluation of sleep apnea, ultrasound abdomen for any evidence of organomegaly, history of androgen intake very important, particularly in the young patients when age is below 60 years, as the incidence of the primary polycythemia is usually high or usually occurs after the 6th decade post-renal transplant also. So we have discussed the JAK-STAT pathway in the ET in the myelofibrosis, and now it is the polycythemia vera. So basically it is the JAK-STAT pathway activation which is responsible for it is autonomous activation of this pathway which is responsible for the polycythemia vera. At the extracellular part, receptors is there for the erythropoietin, and when there is some problem, some mutations occur here in the JAK-STAT pathway, it leads to the polycythemia vera. So it is basically a clonal process actually. So JAK2 mutations, intracellular signaling molecule, it's coupled to several cell surface receptors that lack intrinsic kinase domain. Acquired mutation in the autoinhibitory domain of the JAK2 tyrosine kinase is responsible. That is why most of the time we advise this mutation. JAK2 V617F mutation can be found in 95% of the cases. In another 4 to 5% of the cases, it is the exon 12 mutation. So the diagnosis, for confirmation of the diagnosis of polycythemia vera, the JAK2 mutation, either it is V617F or exon 12 mutation, has to be there to confirm the diagnosis of the polycythemia vera. Rare mutation like LNK and SOCS mutations can occur, but these are of theoretical importance, and for research purposes, these mutations are not available in the government or private laboratories. Clinical presentations. Usually the diagnosis is by chance, that is like ET and myelofibrosis when patient is being investigated for some other disease. Diagnosis after thrombotic event. The incidence of thrombotic event may be 12 to 30%. In 12% it is severe, and overall incidence is around 30%. And diagnosis resulting from disease-related symptoms also can occur. These are the important symptoms and these are the important signs. Important symptoms include the fatigue, headache, pruritus in 50% of the cases, dyspnea, dizziness, visual changes, weight loss, excessive sweating, paresthesia, that is arthromyalgia, which was also seen in patient of ET, that is the essential thrombocytosis or essential thrombocythemia. Large vessel thrombosis like arterial or venous, epistaxis or GI other mucosal bleed. So here both arterial as well as venous thrombosis. Polycythemia vera, just like it is a risk factor for the arterial as well as venous thrombosis. Signs, patient may not be having any signs, but in 30 to 40% of patients, patient may have splenomegaly. Patients' plethoric face is very important, and that is why sometimes it resembles that we are dealing with the patients of COPD, copper. Hepatomegaly, cutaneous ulcers, gouty features, and pulmonary hypertension can also be seen. So, which criteria to apply for diagnosis? According to 2008 criteria, hemoglobin of more than 18%, 18.5 in men, 16.5 in women, or evidence of increased red cell volume or presence of JAK2 mutations, and the minor criteria, that is either bone marrow biopsy showing hypercellularity for age with myeloproliferation, serum erythropoietin level below the normal reference range. This is below the normal reference range because if it is above, it suggests secondary polycythemia or secondary erythrocytosis. Endogenous erythroid colony formation in vitro, actually it is. So diagnosis of PV requires meeting either the both major criteria and one minor criteria, or first major criteria and two minor criteria. So total it requires the three criteria: two major, one minor, or first major and two minor criteria should be there to diagnose it. This is 2008 criteria. However, 2016 criteria, there is a slight change in the major criteria. There are three major criteria. Hemoglobin has reduced to 16.5 in men and 16 gram percent in women, or hematocrit 49 and 48%, which was initially 60 and 56%. Or increased red cell mass, that is red cell count, you can see. Bone marrow biopsy showing hypercellularity for age with trilineage growth, panmyelosis, including prominent erythroid, myelocytic, and megakaryocytic proliferation. This panmyelosis can also be seen in patients of CML, but rarely it is seen in patients of myelofibrosis and the ET patients. And presence of JAK2 mutation, either it was JAK2 V617F or JAK2 exon mutations. And minor criteria like erythropoietin, diagnosis of PV requires the first two major criteria and one minor criteria, or all the three major criteria. No, this is the older criteria actually, because in the pre-JAK2 era. So just I want to apprise about these criteria to you. Polycythemia vera study group, these are called as actually. So these were divided into A and B, and A1, A2, A3, A4. A1 is raised RCM, that is 25% above mean normal predicted value. Absence of secondary causes, palpable splenomegaly, and clonality marker, X-linked polymorphism or abnormal karyotype that was used as a marker for clonal proliferation. Thrombocytosis, platelet more than 4 lakh. Neutrophilic leukocytosis, that is neutrophil predominance leukocytosis more than 10,000. Splenomegaly demonstrated by either isotope or ultrasound. And EEG growth or low serum is, sorry, EEC. EEC is the erythroid colony formation actually. It is the extramedullary erythroid colony formation, growth or low serum levels. It requires the A plus, A2, A3, at least three criteria in the, or A1, A2 plus A4, or A1, A2 plus two of the B criteria. Either the from the A1 to A4 any three, or A1, A2 plus two of the B criteria. However, after the development of technology for these JAK2 mutations, these criteria are not used nowadays actually. Now, post PVMF. As I told you in the myelofibrosis, the ET patients and PV patients can progress to myelofibrosis and also can progress to frank leukemia. That is a myeloleukemia most of the time. So for to say the post PVMF, there has to be the first confirmed case of polycythemia vera, and patient then developing the fibrosis in the bone marrow. Then we call this as a post PV myelofibrosis actually. This is the typical bone marrow. This is the biopsy, not aspirate bone marrow biopsy picture, which is showing the trilineage hematopoiesis. These are all the megakaryocytes. These are the megakaryocytes. These are the neutrophils clusters. These are all megakaryocyte large cells. Then small. These are the neutrophil, not myeloid precursors, and along with this, these are the erythroid precursors. So there is a panmyelosis, which is good, which is specific for the polycythemia vera, and second condition is the CML. So post PVMF, this is the fibrosis actually. Without the previous history of PV, it is very difficult to confirm it is a post PVMF. Then we will say it is a primary myelofibrosis. Is bone marrow histopathology required for diagnosis? Usually it is not required. However, if these two criteria, when these two criteria are not there, and then only the biopsy is mandatory actually. If there is a JAK2 mutation positive and low erythropoietin level, bone marrow biopsy is not required. But in other conditions where this criteria are not met, then bone marrow biopsy is required for the confirmation of polycythemia vera. Now, how to approach for this? Any patient of arthrocytosis. This diagram is showing approach to any patient of arthrocytosis. That is, go for the JAK2 mutations and measure the erythropoietin level. If the erythropoietin level is high, go for the JAK2 mutation. If JAK2 mutation is negative, it is secondary. If JAK2 mutation is positive, repeat, because high erythropoietin, JAK2 is usually not likely to be positive in such patients. If erythropoietin level is low or normal, then go for the JAK2 mutation. If it is positive, it is polycythemia. If it is negative, then either repeat the JAK2 mutations in the other, like exon 12 mutation, which is of course seen in 4 to 6% of patients only. And if it is positive, it confirms the diagnosis of polycythemia vera. But if it is negative, then go for the bone marrow biopsy. And if bone marrow biopsy is suggestive of the polycythemia vera or not. Now, risk factor for the thrombosis, as we have discussed in the ET, also the polycythemia vera and the ET patient, they are at risk factor. They are at risk for thrombotic events. Whereas in myelofibrosis, the thrombotic events was not very significant actually. So the ET and PV are responsible for the thrombotic episode. So these are the two additional hematological conditions in addition to like hyperhomocystinemia, hypertension, diabetes, chronic smoking history. So these are the additional two risk factors from the hematological disorders which are responsible for the thrombotic episodes. And the risk factors include age more than 60 years, previous history of vascular events, cardiovascular risk factors like hypertension, smoking, hypercholesterolemia, diabetes, obesity. So that's why every patient of PV, we always ask for the cardiovascular risk factor, whether he's carrying this risk factor or not. History of smoking, history, and then leukocytosis on this. Yeah. Risk factor for disease evolution. Post PVMF, 10% of PV patients they will evolve to post PVMF. When TLC is more than 15,000, allele burden of the JAK2 mutation is more than 50%, and myelofibrosis is threefold higher risk of developing post PVMF. Evolution to AML. It is a rare event without any specific risk factor to be looked at for diagnosis. Out of these three known BCR-ABL, non-BCR-ABL positive CMPN or BCR-ABL negative CMPN, myelofibrosis is the condition which carries the highest risk of transformation to AML. But probably advanced age and high leukocyte count, previous therapy with chlorambucil, busulfan, pipobromin, and phosphorus 32, which is a radioactive compound which was previously used for the treatment of polycythemia vera, ET, and UNC. So risk stratification, again, low risk, intermediate risk, high risk, just like the patients of ET. If age is more than 60 years or history of thrombosis, patient will come in the high risk category. If there is no such history and there is no cardiovascular risk factors, patient will come in the low risk category. Our intermediate, when age is more than 60, history of thrombosis is not there, but patient having cardiovascular. When patient is having only cardiovascular risk factors and age is more than 60 years, history of thrombosis, then patients come in the intermediate category. Extreme thrombocytosis, like I told you in the ET patients also, that is more than 15 lakh is the risk factor for bleeding. Its role as the risk factor for thrombosis is uncertain. Increasing leukocyte count has been identified as a novel risk factor for thrombosis. But still it is a doubtful situation. This diagram is showing this survival curve is actually showing post PVMF time dependent survival estimations. When no risk factor, patient is almost having a normal life. When one risk factor, there is a slight reduction in the lifespan of the patient. However, when the patient carries 2 or 3 risk factors, then there is significant shortage in the life, significant reduction or shortage of the lifespan of the patients. And these are the three other important. When HB is less than 10 gram percent, platelet is less than 1 lakh, and WBC count is more than 30,000. Therapy. What are the goals of the therapy? To prevent thrombosis. Basically, we have to give the symptomatic relief to the patient, and we have to prevent the thrombosis occurrence as well as recurrence. To delay, if possible, evolution into MF or AML and control the disease-related symptoms. And the goal of the hematocrit is 45% in men and 42% is women. Correction of severe risk factors is very important. Like if patient is a chronic smoker, patient is having hypertension, patient is having diabetes, patient is obese, patient is having hypercholesterolemia. So we have to modify these risk factors. We have to correct if possible. Phlebotomy. Phlebotomy can be used as a single treatment for hematocrit control in those at low risk for thrombosis. However, when patient falls in the high risk category and the platelet is less than 15 lakh, patient is given ecosprin along with the phlebotomy. The idea of phlebotomy is to maintain the hematocrit, to maintain the hemoglobin around 14 to 15 gram percent and hematocrit 45% in the men and 42% in the woman. But at the same time, we have to see whether patient should not develop hypertension also. Once hematocrit normalizes, then we have to check the CBC for every 4 to 8 weeks, and as and when required, when phlebotomy has to be advised to such patients. Other condition where phlebotomy is used as a treatment modality is hemochromatosis, if you remember. So phlebotomy is actually the best way of decreasing the iron store and the hemoglobin from our body, provided the patient is able to tolerate it. However, if we are overusing, if there is enthusiast overuse of phlebotomy, which leads to iron deficiency and reactive thrombocytosis, so we have to avoid it. Antiplatelet therapy. This was the first trial, actually, ECLAP trial, which has shown a significant effect of use of antiplatelet as compared to the placebo in the terms of reduction in the incidence of non-fatal MI, non-fatal stroke, pulmonary embolism, major DVT, or death from any cardiovascular causes, and there was non-significant risk of bleeding. So the aspirin is the treatment of choice. Dose ranges from 75 to 150 milligrams per day. Actually. So you can use 75, you can use 100, you can use 150, but usually the dose coming in is 75 to 150 milligrams is there. 100 milligram is not available actually. However, in case of bleeding or gastric intolerance, sometimes we have to withdraw the aspirin in such cases. Cytoreductive therapy. Cytoreductive therapy at diagnosis when there is high risk of thrombosis, then this patient is falling into the high risk category. When age is more than 60 years or prior history of thrombosis, we have to use the hydroxyurea in such patients. Or splenomegaly is there in this patient. Symptomatic, not mild splenomegaly, but moderate to severe splenomegaly or massive splenomegaly. And platelet count is more than 15 lakhs. Unexplained leukocytosis exceeding 20 to 25,000, more than 20,000 at least. Disease-related symptoms are there which are not relieved or partially relieved by the phlebotomy and the ecosprin. During the course of disease, low-risk patients who shift to high-risk category develop progressive leukocytosis. There is a thrombocytosis or there is a increasing organomegaly like splenomegaly, uncontrolled symptoms, intolerance or high need of phlebotomy. Dose of hydroxyurea is the drug of choice in all age PV patients. Starting dose of hydroxyurea is 15 to 25 mg per kilogram per day. Remember, before imatinib era in patients of CML, hydroxyurea was also used as a drug of choice because it was cheap, it was easily available. However, the problem with hydroxyurea was that the cytogenetic and molecular remission was achieved only in around 5 to 10% of patients, whereas in case of CML, our main aim is to have the cytological and cytogenetic and molecular remission has to be achieved, which was possible by the imatinib. Today also we are using hydroxyurea in those patients of CML who are intolerant to imatinib and who cannot afford the second or third line TKI actually. Dose ranges from the 1000 milligram to 1500 milligram per day. Higher doses in case of leukocytosis, thrombocytosis, and splenomegaly. Dose we can go up to 3 grams per day or 15 to 20 milligrams per day. Female patients on hydroxyurea has to avoid pregnancies. But since the Polycythemia vera is usually the disease of the elder population, so we are rarely encountered with such situations actually. Maintenance dose to keep the CBC within normal range using the lowest possible dose. Check CBC monthly and steady state every 3 months. Is interferon alternative to H is hydroxyurea? It can be suggested in particular situation of PV like high risk female with childbearing potential, though rarely we encountered with such situations because this is disease of the elderly population actually. But yes, some you can say the young patients are also have been identified with this disease. High risk young patients who refuse hydroxyurea because of inflexible fear that hydroxyurea favors leukemic evolutions. There is, you can say, this warning with the hydroxyurea that is it favors leukemic evolution but over a long period of time. Second line therapy after hydroxyurea intolerance or failure or resistance. Now, JAK inhibitors in polycythemia vera. JAK inhibitors are the drug of choice in case of myelofibrosis, particularly in the high-risk myelofibrosis. But now the JAK inhibitors also are finding indication in the resistance cases of ET as well as in polycythemia vera patients also. Ruxolitinib, as I told you, Jakafi, ruxolitinib is the molecular name actually. Oral JAK2 inhibitor now approved in the US for myelofibrosis. It can be used in the PVR also. And ET, resistance cases of polycythemia vera and resistance cases of arthrocytosis. But problem with the JAK2 inhibitor is the cost of the drugs and the side effect. So there is a significant symptomatic improvement if with the use of the ruxolitinib, as it reduces the hematocrit in to less than 45% in 97% of the cases, and more than 50% spleen reduction in 80% of the cases, leukocytosis normalization in 73%, thrombocytosis in 69%. So this JAK2 inhibitor is like a wonder drug, like imatinib in CML, so JAK2 in resistance cases of polycythemia vera. Even in high-risk patients, it can be used, but problem of this is the cost of the drug actually, and some significant side effects, particularly increased incidence of infections, UTI, fungal infections, pneumonias. Complete response when it is said the normal hematocrit, normal platelet, normal WBC, and spleen size is reduced to 50%. We say it is a complete response. Patients also obtain rapid improvement in the patient-reported symptom scores. 82% of patients were still on treatment at 20 months of therapy. So the problem with this drug has to be continued till we want this improvement in the symptoms of the patients. Actually. Now, some of the critical situations, as I told you, this is responsible for the thrombotic events, both arterial as well as venous. Arterial thrombosis usually leads to stroke, myocardial infarction, peripheral artery disease, but venous thrombosis can lead to the this SVT or SVT or DVT type phenomenon. So for treatment of SVT or DVT, we have to use the low molecular weight heparin and hydroxyurea. Surgery. This is also a high risk situation. Approximately 8% of PV and ET patients develop fatal thrombosis or hemorrhage after surgery. So such patients, before taking up for surgery, they had to be normalized as far as the hemoglobin and the platelet count is concerned. So try to achieve the best possible CBC with hydroxyurea. However, if this is a emergent surgery, then of course we have to go for surgery after taking high risk consent to the patients. And once patient stabilizes, post surgery we have to start the treatment with the hydroxyurea as early as possible. And some of the guidelines suggest prophylactic low molecular weight heparins also in such patients. Pregnancy, as told you, is not usual. Higher median age of the patient and increase of. However, if the pregnancy occurs or in however if the disease occurs in young patients and they want to pregnant, there is an increased risk of abortion, and we have to avoid any type of cytotoxic agents like hydroxyurea. In such patients, we have to give the interferon. So, though interferon has its own problem is of daily injection has to be taken, and it is associated with flu symptoms, and it is associated with the cost of the. It is associated with the cost. That is, it is costly as compared to hydroxyurea. We have to maintain hematocrit less than 45% with phlebotomy, with ecosprin, and with interferon if it is required. Adding aspirin, if not contraindicated, low molecular weight heparin after delivery until 6 weeks postpartum. Adding low molecular weight heparin during pregnancy is if there is a previous major thrombotic or any complications. Disease evolution, symptomatic treatment, steroids and danazol for anemia, but usually as polycythemia vera, they have the high hemoglobin. Only in the spent phase, the patients are going to have the anemia actually when disease progresses. So in such patients, we can use the steroid danazol, but the response is not very good actually. If patient goes into spent phase, then patient is ultimately going to develop the myelofibrosis and the AML, and such patients have a very short lifespan. Hydroxyl is rarely effective. JAK2 inhibitors cannot be used. AML induction therapy followed by transplant in young age patients with AML evolution. But since this is disease of elderly, so it has its own complication and it is not possible to have the stem cell transplantation in the elderly population. Secondary polycythemia, yes, sometimes we come across such patients of secondary polycythemia where the hematocrit is very high. So we have to see the patient's symptoms. If the symptoms are there in the patient, we have to go for phlebotomy. But at the same time, we have to monitor the blood pressure of the patient also. And if phlebotomy is required, and if patient develops blood pressure, if patient develops hypotension, at the same time, the same amount of the normal saline has to be infused through the IV line in such patients to maintain the normal blood pressure so as to avoid the hypotension and giddiness. So this was about the polycythemia, and today, just in